on this show, we've all been talking about how bad it was that the Chinese Communist Party has been controlling the global medical supply chain. So it's great to talk to somebody who has been talking about that for 15 years, even before the show began.
Yeah, it's something that, I just know my little piece of it. We're involved in masks and respirators. And in about 2004, all of America's major mask and respirator makers left the country. And we decided to start a mask company in the interest of national security. We saw a vacuum and we were very naive. We started telling the story basically that hasn't changed for 15 years, and that's that China is going to end up controlling the U.S. mask supply. A pandemic will come, probably from that region of the world, and America's mask supply will be cut off. And for 15 years, I couldn't get it. Well, for 13 years, I couldn't get anyone to believe me. For about the last year and a half, they have. So,
well, I don't know, considering where we are right now and how China is going right back to making most of the masks, and American mask manufacturers are at risk of getting shut down again. I think no one still believes you, even after the pandemic.
I mean, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, a global pandemic coming from China controlling all of our masks. I mean, who would believe that, right?
It's surreal. The whole thing is so weird. In 2007, I thought it was so obvious. I thought, again, we were naive. I thought if I notify hospitals and notify the government that all of the U.S. mask makers have left and China is gaining control of the mask supply, that's a big problem. It's a national security problem, but I couldn't get anyone. I mean, literally, I couldn't get news people, politicians, hospital administrators, group purchasing organizations. Heck, I even went to the Hospital Risk Managers Association meeting, and I said the mask supply is going to collapse, and you're going to get sued because you can't protect your people, your staff, and your patients. And you're going to get sued because I've been out here saying this for 10 years publicly. And they yawned. I mean, I couldn't get anyone to listen. I felt like the only sane person in the asylum. Literally, yeah.
So what was the reaction? Was it just disbelief, or was it, oh, well, this won't be a problem?
Apathy, disbelief. And I'm the only one. Here's the problem. The problem is I was the only one saying this, the only one in my industry saying this,
which is insane.
And so all of my competitors who relied on selling foreign-made masks were dismissing my warnings. Here's another problem: if a hospital looks at their masks boxes, they can't tell where they come from. The mask market leader marks their boxes product of USA, further processed in Mexico. It's attorney speak for, we send some fabric to Mexico. They completely make the mask in Mexico. I even reported this to the Federal Trade Commission, and they said it's legal. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's like sending a roll of sheet metal to Mexico, totally making a Ford F-150 pickup truck, sending it back here and put product of USA on it. It's that kind of stuff needs to stop, because if right now all of America's hospitals decided to buy American, they wouldn't know if they bought American or not. And there's a 95% chance they're not buying American.
So back in 2004, why did all the American mask manufacturers move over to China? What was the appeal?
It's pretty simple. Hospitals don't just independently buy products. They all belong to buying groups. This happened about 30 years ago. They all joined these giant buying groups, and they bid out the products. Like they'll say, okay, now we're bidding out masks for 2,000 hospitals. And the low bidder wins. Well, it doesn't take long to figure out who the low bidder is going to be. It's going to be Asia. And that's why so many of our critically important medical products, masks, respirators, drugs, all sorts of things come from China. It's all about the money.
And that's the real problem with this, because the Chinese Communist Party, it's a state-controlled economy. They understand having control over the global medical supply chain is really important for them. So they are able to put out to flood the market with, it's basically dumping medical supplies. They make things below the market cost so they can drive out any competition and gain total control.
That is what we're seeing. They sell masks for a penny.
Literally a penny.
A penny. Yeah, imagine that. Making a mask, shipping it here, selling it for a penny. That is impossible. The nose wire, just the bendable nose wire across the top of the mask costs more than a penny. It costs more than a penny to ship it here. The fabric costs more than a penny. An American-made mask, you can buy 3 of them for the price of a gumball. It's a dime. Is that a big deal? No, it didn't used to be. Masks cost less than they did 30 years ago, folks. American-made masks cost, you can buy 3 for the price of a gumball. And yet China sells them for a penny. And I guess they must be being subsidized by the government, because no business person is stupid enough to sell a product for a penny that costs them a nickel or 7 cents to make.
And I think that really shows the intention of the Chinese Communist Party with this. It's not about making money. It's not about doing business. It's about unrestricted warfare. They want this control.
You know, I'm not a politician. I'm about as politically incorrect as they come. But it sure looks like that to me. I mean, we're 15 years old, and we do not have an international business. Why? Because China's giving away the product. It's everywhere. Something interesting that happened 10 or 12 years ago is France realized this problem, and the French government put out a bid for, like, I don't know, 1 billion masks or something, which started a couple of French mask makers, because they said we're dependent on China. But I couldn't get our government to understand that or to react to it. Now, one thing that's interesting is Congressman Michael Burgess. Look him up. He was speaking at our factory. You can find it on the internet. Look on YouTube. Look up Michael Burgess and Prestige Ameritech. After the last pandemic, I convinced him and the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, who was most recently the energy secretary, to come and speak at our grand opening after a pandemic, because we're going to protect Americans. Ironically, 11 years later, he's co-chairing the subcommittee that I'm testifying before last May, saying what the hell happened. And I'm saying, hey, you were there 10 years ago. I tried to get you to help me, So, I mean, listen, folks, there was not a rock that I left unturned on this issue. It was my mission and obsession for 15 years.
So tell us a little bit about who you approached in the U.S. government. What the response was. Did you manage to talk to people in the federal government, in the executive branch?
I talked with the DOD, the VA, Congressman Joe Barton, Congresswoman Kay Granger, Senator Patrick Leahy. Associate of mine spoke with Schumer, General Mattis. I wrote General Mattis. I wrote to President Obama, President Bush, President Trump multiple times. The only responsive agency that I found was a division of HHS called BARDA, B-A-R-D-A. They're the folks who fund new countermeasures for pandemics and things. The first director of that was a man named Robin Robinson. The second director was an interim director, Richard Hatchett, and the third was Rick Bright. And you'll maybe remember Rick Bright was involved in the whistleblower case in which I testified. All 3 of those fine public servants said, Mike, you are right. We're not allowed to talk to reporters about this. We agree with you. If you can get hospitals and hospital group purchasing organizations to call us, we will verify that we think the mask supply is going to fail. Here's the shame. I couldn't get anyone to make the call. They didn't want to know. It's all about money. It's all about saving money, not saving lives. The message of the mask supply is going to collapse and your patients and your staff are going to get sick, and it doesn't have to happen. We're talking about pennies here. They don't want to hear that message. Hospitals want to save money.
Gosh, I'm just thinking about like all of the rhetoric behind like, oh, how important, it is to go into lockdowns, how important all the vaccination efforts are, and yet the government wasn't willing to spend pennies to save lives with masks.
Well, the government and hospitals and hospital group purchasing organizations, everybody in the whole chain. And I want you to think about something here. The people in the hospitals that I have access to, they're incentivized to save money. The people in the group purchasing organizations are incentivized to save money. When a guy comes in and says, your mask supply is going to collapse, your people are going to get sick and die for no reason, I can fix that problem. It's like I'm speaking a different language. Their eyes glaze over. And again, I couldn't get them to make the call. I said, here's 202 area code. Here's HHS in Washington, D.C. This is a high government official. Robin Robinson, his pay grade, he's like an admiral. Call this guy. He will verify that your supply is going to collapse. Now, I can say this. A couple of people did. World famous MD Anderson Cancer Center. They've been a patient. They've been a customer of mine for several years. They believed it. Robinson actually got on a plane and went and spoke to a group of people down in Houston, not selling masks, of course, but just saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. This was several years ago. MD Anderson said, we believe you, and they switched. Only one other big hospital system did, and that's Texas Health Resources. And Texas, they have about 30 hospitals. And by the way, they were the hospital that had the Ebola patient. So I've been protecting those guys for a long time. But by and large, people just didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it.
Was that also the problem in the government, is the money issue?
I don't know what the problem was in the government. I used to be really altruistic, and I thought that the folks in the government were really smart and were really up on stuff. So that's why at the beginning of this, I thought all I've got to do is bring this up. But it didn't work that way. I'll tell you how bad it was. In 2006, we started talking about this. In November of 2007, HHS came to us, visited our factory. I've got their presentation that they gave us. And they said, we think the mask supply is going to fail in a pandemic. And we said, yeah, we've been saying that for a year. We're so excited you're down here. Let's fix this problem. And they said, oh, no. We're only authorized to study the problem. And I said, I'm not kidding. We're only authorized to study the problem. So since then, since November of 2007, I latched on to those guys like a leech because they were the only government agency, even though they said they couldn't fix it, didn't have the authorization to fix it, they could verify it. Because otherwise, I'm just a mask salesman out telling people the mask supply is going to collapse. I'm the only one doing it. So why will people believe me? So I kept thinking, hey, these people believe me. They're an important government agency. They will verify what I'm saying is true. And yet I couldn't get people to listen to them. I don't know if you guys ever saw the old Warner Brothers cartoon about the guy who finds a singing frog. And he finds this frog in the cornerstone of a building they're tearing down, and it starts singing Broadway tunes. And every time he rents a big hall and has the frog out and it's going to sing. And the problem is the frog only sings when it's with him alone. That was HHS for 13 years. They were my singing frog. They would sing to me. I could call them. I could email them. They'd say, yes, the mask supply is going to collapse. And I say, well, here, Infection Control Today wants to interview you. I'm sorry, I can't. Robin Robinson was going to endorse the Secure Mask Supply Association. Look up securemasksupply.org. I have not changed that since 2014. That thing has existed since 2014. He was going to endorse it, and HHS attorneys said he would get fired if he did. So I'm out there twisting in the wind on my own for 13 years with HHS saying, you go, hey, keep going, keep telling this story, it's true. But I couldn't get them to publicly endorse it.